Oh,
Welcome back, friends. It's another episode of The Mindful CEO. I am your co-host, Chris Angel, and I'm also joined by our other co-host. I'm just going to come up with a different name for you, Aaron.
There we go. The other co-host. That's
the
excellent.
other one.
It's like the other woman.
Can we have like special names like Thing 1 and Thing 2? I'm Thing 1 and joined by Thing 2.
Thing 2.
Today is Aaron Hendon. Hello.
Excellent. Thing 2 here, coming to you live from Seussland.
Does that mean Chris, I can be Thing 3?
You are Thing 3, Ray.
Okay.
You are Thing 3. You're the cat in the hat.
Brilliant.
There you go.
You're the cat in the hat this week, Ray. So so Ray Martin is with us, and Ray's got such a great backstory. I'm just going to let Ray introduce himself because his pathway in life is such a cottywomple, such a what's the next thing? What's the next thing? What's the next thing? Oh, look, let's go do this thing and see what opens up out of that, which is really how we're that we get to unfold what it is to be a mindful CEO. So Ray, really welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Take a couple minutes, introduce yourself, and we'll see where that goes, and we'll see what opens up out of that.
Thanks very much. I mean, my name is Ray Martin. I'm a leadership coach in the UK, and I've been doing that kind of work for many, many years. And I'm perhaps best known for a book I published called Life Without a Tie, because when I was in my early career, my dream was to be a successful and well-established and respected businessman. And so I just followed this sort of blueprint, that the default blueprint of getting a good job, a wife, a house, and all of those things. And I reached the pinnacle of success when I became CEO and won an award from the Daily Telegraph in the UK as Business Leader of the Year. But I have to be really honest and say, behind all of that, I really wasn't that happy. I really didn't enjoy that life. I came to realize that the way I defined success was actually quite limiting. And as a result of that, and my business partner was the woman I was married to. One day she said, "I'm leaving you and I'm leaving the company." It was quite sudden. When that happened, my father decided to get very ill and he passed away. So in 2004, within a 3 or 4 month period, my life as I knew it had sort of literally fallen to pieces, which is perhaps a good thing in hindsight. Friends of mine said to me, "Why don't you go on a 6-month sabbatical, do some healing, get yourself kind of sorted out and reflect on what's happened and look for the deeper meaning and messages in it." I said, "That's a good idea." So I minimalized my life, sold my house in London, got a few things cleared out of the way so I could do a 6-month sabbatical, which did not go according to plan. I ended up living out of my backpack for 14 years. And it was an incredibly weird, strange, and life-changing journey of reinvention, which I wrote about in detail in the book. So that's a kind of giving people an idea of the journey. I think I was already understanding what it takes to be a good leader from a technical perspective before I went on that journey. But what the journey filled in for me was a lot more depth and self-understanding through meditation and Buddhist teachings and other things that I participated in. That I now have a mindfulness practice and I teach a mindfulness program. And so, it's a long story. I'll just jump in when you guys are talking, when it's irrelevant.
Go ahead, Chris. You were going to say
no, I was mesmerized. I love listening to your voice. It's very soothing. So you. I'm like, keep speaking, Ray. I love
Thank you.
I love the story. I'm so curious how a 6-month sabbatical in a backpack turned into 14 years. That's quite a extension of the intended sabbatical.
Yeah. Essentially, when the 6 months was up, I didn't feel like I really transformed my mind. I was really agitated, scared. I felt a lot of guilt and shame about having wrecked my marriage and all these things. And I just really wasn't ready to return to the life I'd left. And I spoke to travelers who I met when I was traveling, and one of them suggested, they said, "Well, why don't you go and do a Vipassana retreat in a monastery?" And I didn't even know what that was, to be honest. I said, "What's that? I've never heard of it." They said, "Well, you go into a monastery for 10 days and you meditate in silence, and the monks will teach you the Dharma and the Buddhist teachings, and it'll change how you're seeing things potentially." I thought, I've never been silent for 10 minutes, let alone 10 days. The idea of it just horrified me. But at a deeper level, something inside me knew that was the right thing to do. I now call that my voice of inner wisdom. I didn't know what that was, what it was then. But that changed my life, that Vipassana retreat. And when I came out of that, it was like if I'd had a volume knob physically on the side of my head, and it was the noise in my mind was at 10. When I came out, it was like 1 or 2. And I knew there was something really important in that discovery that I needed to keep developing. So I decided to stay longer in Asia and join a mindfulness community and meditate every week with the Sangha and kind of just build on that. And then as a result of doing that, I became much more aware and mindful of the place I was living and some of the things going on. And I started to see things that I really wanted to get involved with, like an elephant sanctuary in Thailand, which was doing a beautiful job rescuing distressed elephants, but didn't have much money. And I went to an orphanage in Nepal and ran a picnic for 60 orphan kids, and they loved it. And I thought, I'd love to do more of this, but they've got no money. And I thought, what could I do? What could I do? And then I just by random chance met a guy who was traveling who'd run 6 marathons. And I was 49 years old at this point. And I said, I listened to him talk about running marathons. I thought, gosh, I could feel my body kind of tingling all over with interest. I said, do you think I could run a marathon, Matt? His name was Matt. He looked at me. He said, well, you look quite fit. He said, I tell you what, I know why you want to do it, because I wanted to raise money for these things. He said, if you stay here where I'm living, and that was a place called Chiang Mai in Thailand, if you stay here for 6 months, I'll train you how to run your first marathon. I said, okay. We shook hands. It's a deal. And I started fundraising. I managed to raise $15,000 US dollars to deploy to these things through the business connections I had, whilst I was training for my first marathon. And guess what? I managed to get a place in the New York Marathon, my first ever one. And I was just blown away when I got that place. And that was a great example of a confirmation signal that we were talking about earlier, because I thought, if I get a place through the ballot in that marathon in my first go, it's absolutely right. I'm there. And I did. It was easy. And I knew that confirmed to me I was doing the right thing with my time and my energy, and it was just a perfect confirmation signal. And so I ran the New York Marathon in 2009. Then I went back for a year to those places and deployed the money and actually had things built at the orphanage. And that was a project in itself. It took me 2 years of the 14 years. And my life just started rolling in a way I was not, I was not in control of it. I was just letting it guide me.
Yeah.
And so that's why, to answer that question, that's how it lasted 14 years, because I just kept following that role. Yeah.
I mean, really, when we talk about a Coddy-Wample, that's really what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Ray, that's our big, so the flag we fly here on the Mindful CEO is the joy of the Coddy-Wample, to move purposefully toward a vague destination.
Yeah.
And as long as you have some idea of a direction, then see what the next step is. What's the next thing that opens up? Oh, the next thing is these 6 months. Oh, now it's someone says Vipassana. Now I do that. And it's just the next thing that opens up. And when life is approached that way, it's so much, it's more fun, it's more interesting, but it's also really fulfilling, and it's rewarding, like, financially, mentally, spiritually, emotionally. One of my big, I don't know, one of the things I found myself saying on repeat is, no one ever got on their deathbed and thought, I can't believe I didn't close that deal.
Yeah, that's right.
No one ever thinks that.
I wish I'd spent more hours at the office.
No one ever has that thought. And yet but we're not in active pursuit of the things that you are going to say.
Yeah. Do you know what they do say on their deathbed? Because, in that book by Bronnie Ware, The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying, she specifically refers to it.
That's right. Okay. Yeah. I love you.
They said the number one regret that everybody had, and this is over 1,000 people in the hospice who she asked the question, was, I wished I'd lived my life true to myself and not the life that others expected of me. Yeah, that's the number one regret.
And the most common conversations are, I love you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me.
Yeah, gosh.
But we're not, that's the purpose of this show. Our show is how do you find that balance? Because, you have to fund that. You do have you have a calling in one level. In business, there are plenty of businesses that aren't a function of, well, I'm supposed to do this out of school, and now I'm going to follow that. If you're on that track, right? Like, I'm doing this because I'm supposed to, that's sort of like I don't know, it's a junior version of the conversation, because that's sort of obvious. That's like, okay, just stop hitting yourself in the head, right? Like, just stop doing that. And fine. But there are people that really are, like, they're engaged with something that's their calling, that does speak to them, that does make a difference in the world, does fulfill on something, is important to them, is created from a space of like what we're talking about here. And even in that, there's, the thing about confirmation signals and that you were talking about is like, how do you navigate those waters of doing something that's important, that matters, and having it succeed in the nitty-gritty of it? Like,
does it need to succeed though, Aaron? This is a question.
Well, it depends how you measure success.
That's
everything's got to be defined, right?
Yeah.
Like, what's success? Well, talk to me about that. When you say does it need to succeed, what is it that you mean by that?
Because when I left to start the journey that I was describing, I realized that I couldn't measure the progress of my life in the same way I could when I was a CEO, because that was measured by the achievement of some very specific targets, financially and otherwise, with people in the company and their development and stuff like that. But when I was traveling on my own, I had no such way of measuring. How do I know I'm making progress in the right way? And so I literally had to sit down and define some guiding principles for myself. So I could get a sense that everything was all right. And so, for example, one of them was the principle of non-attachment. I thought, I've got to be willing to go into an experimental mindset and try things out without any interest in them having a specific outcome, because I saw my attachment to, I'll be happy if that outcome happens and unhappy if that outcome happens. And I thought, that can't work, because I've got to be experimental here. I'm in an unknown world, an unknown life. So I sort of made a guiding principle, non-attachment. I'm going to be willing to experiment and just take the data that I learn from it and not be in any way caring whether it's measured as a success or a failure or whatever it would be. That would be an example. I had 10 of these guiding principles.
Okay, good. Well, hang on. But even then, success has a definition for you. It's just when you say you don't care if it's a success or not.
Materially, let's say.
And I think it's really important that we separate the word success from material success. That there really is a thing called material success that's a distinct element of success. But then there's, the Vipassana retreat is measurable in some way.
Yes.
Right? Like that you went is a success. That that a business, that a business fails financially. Has elements of success in it. We were successful at this, or, like I'm thinking about, I started and ran a bakery for 10 years in Albuquerque.
Oh, wow.
So from 1990 to 1999, that financially was not successful.
Yes.
But it lasted 9 years, which is exponentially longer than most startup restaurants last. And there's not one person who lived in Albuquerque, certainly not anyone who lived around the University of the Albuquerque, in Albuquerque, the University of Mexico, from 1990 to 1999 that didn't know the bakery. No way. And I've had, hundreds of employees go on to do great things. And it was a whole community. So there was success, but it's all about how you measure it. Like, what are you, so, and I think the confirmation signal thing is interesting relative to that. There's, on one hand, KPIs are confirmation signals. Yes. Right. That's what you use KPIs for. Those are confirmation signals. Yeah. If you're measuring financial success, you need your KPIs. And I don't think financial success, I think financial success also gets a bad rap in some ways. Like, you can't have both. Like, can you in fact run a mindful business that's both financially successful and fulfills on the intentions and the things that matter, how does that happen? How do you get, I think that's sort of like a holy grail of life. Like, could you run a business that is in fact financially successful and, I don't know, esoterically successful?
Yeah.
What's the other bucket, right? I don't know. Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I wish what I'm trying to do is sort of pinpoint an actual business, but I don't know that I can't name one.
I
right
don't know
now.
that I can either. So maybe it's not. Maybe it is like the Holy Grail. Maybe it is like, stop averting your eyes.
Yeah. No, I get you.
I really hear. We've said this multiple times. So I really hear who's our music producer, Aaron?
Rick Rubin.
Rick Rubin. Yeah, I really hear Rick Rubin in this. Like
yes.
If he has a business, it's a business, his producing.
Totally.
And it's very use your word, I think, Ray, experimental. Like I've got to be experimental and not attached to any, and I'll know it when I hear it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, I like that, or let's try this. He makes money.
What's the name of the book? Ray, have you read this book?
No. This is Rick Rubin. I don't know that.
Yeah, Rick Rubin was the first DJ and the first producer for the Beastie Boys, and has gone on to be one of the most influential music producers in the world. And
Creative Act. The Creative Act is what
the Creative Act.
The Creative Act. I'll look that up. Yeah.
Ray cannot recommend this book more highly. Get it on Audible. He reads it. Fantastic. Okay. And it's very much, and it's right. So so artists like the Beastie Boys, let's just go with people the Grateful Dead, my heart, my soul, my entire childhood.
Right.
Those are people that really did follow their heart, follow their art.
Yeah.
And we're like, no, we're not following the business model. We're following the art. And then the business model caught up.
Yeah.
And, something like $14 million, the Dead and Company just sold over $14 million in tickets for an 18-night run in Las Vegas.
Wow.
$14 million fucking dollars.
Wow.
18 nights. And it's not, I'm not, don't quote me on the number, but it's something obscenely delicious. And, but all they did, but really their whole thing is, Bob Weir used to joke, look, we tried to sell out, but no one was buying. Like we want to sell out.
That's hilarious.
So there are people that those are examples, I think, of businesses.
Yeah.
For sure, Beastie Boys business, the Grateful Dead business, plenty of artists. There's just because I'm limited in my thinking right this second, but
so can I bridge? I want to bridge to what I'm hearing in the conversation so far, and I think I can bridge this then for Ray, for you to kind of, I'd love to hear more about confirmation signals, but I
think that's
like what I keep hearing in this for me is surrender. Like if there were money, I could be experimental about it. When there isn't money, or when the business when I can't feel confident about the direction of the business, then I can't surrender. I feel like I need to control it. And I think that's where you're talking about the inner wisdom versus the mental.
Oh yeah. I've got a great example. Yeah.
So maybe bridge, if you can, to that distinction of inner wisdom versus the brain, and then your confirmation signals.
Yeah. So when I was running the company in England, and my wife had already kind of left the home we were sharing, so I could see that something radical needed to be done, because she was an extremely influential person in the company and very dependent on her to be there. Energetically, I think I knew it was over for me. People said to me, why don't you just find a replacement partner and have them take over and stuff like that. And it was like, I don't know who would be an American equivalent, but in Britain, we used to have a pair of ice skaters called Torvill and Dean, and they were brilliant together. And they weren't married or lovers or anything. They were just professional skaters who were a duo. And if one of them had lost the other, there's no way they would have just replaced the person, because it was them together. That was the partnership. And so I felt like that when my wife decided to leave. I just knew energetically the thing was done. We'd done it for 10 years. It'd been really successful. But I knew I was ready for something different. But I just had no idea what. It terrified me because I was staring into a void. I didn't know what it was. And so all I did in response to that was just get more and more worried and anxious for about a year and got paralyzed with that until one day a good friend said to me, "What's going on?" And I told her, and she said, when you're in a place where you see everything bleakly in despair and you can't think your way out of it, she said, one of the things that really works sometimes is you just go and do an act of service. You go 100% to someone who needs help and just 100% help them, take your attention off yourself. Just go and do that, and something will appear, something will emerge. And I thought, yeah, that's a pretty good bit of advice. So on the strength of that, I found out that a really good friend of mine who was now living in Australia had got breast cancer, and she had a very young son, and I knew her husband, and I used to share a house with them many years before. So I contacted her and said, "I'd like to come out to Australia for a month and look after you, if that's okay, and just take care of your needs while you're having chemo and stuff like this." She said, "That'd be brilliant." Yeah, come. And so I just was completely trusting this guidance to go and help her. And I was really happy doing it. And at the end of the 3 or 4 weeks I was there, nothing had changed. I was still in the same thing. But I did have a few extra days. And so I went up to a place in the north of Australia called Cairns to just say hello to another friend who lived there for a few days. And she said, me and my mum are going to the theatre one evening to see a play. Do you want to come? I said, okay. So they're in the theatre, and in the interval, I'm reading the program about the actors who are in the play. And I see this notice in the corner of the page saying, "We're going to be auditioning for the next production, and the auditions are on Sunday." And I didn't fly back till the next Tuesday. So I said to my friend, and the play was an English play about a member of parliament called Richard Willey, and it's called Out of Order. So I kind of knew the play. I said, I should be in that. I've got the right accent, not these Australians. Good day, mate. How you doing? This is I wasn't an actor. I was just kidding, really. I wasn't an actor. Yeah. But they actually said, "Well, we know the director of the play. Why don't you go to the audition?" I said, "Come on, I've got no chance of being asked to do that. Plus, I've got to fly back to England on Tuesday, and I've got to pay my mortgage myself. I've got all these bills to pay. I can't spend 3 months in a play here. No way." They said, "Well, why don't you just do it for fun?" So I did. I went to the audition and I threw myself into it. Lo and behold, after the auditions, the director called me and said, "We want you to be in the play." Now, I thought they meant I've got a one-line scene where I come on and say, "Here's your tea, sir. Thanks very much," and that's it. I said, "Well, what role?" They said, "We want you to play the part of George," which was the central character of the whole thing, the comedic fool who everything revolves around. 400 lines in the script. My sister-in-law, luckily, is a professional actress, so I contacted her and I told her this. And I said, "Do you think I could somehow blag my way through this, do this?" She said, "Yeah, probably. You can probably handle it." So I said to the guys running the play, I said, "Are you sure you want me? I've got no experience at all. It's a live audience. They're paying for their tickets." They said, "We think you'll be really right for this, and we'll give you loads of support." I said, "Okay, I need to just double check something before I say yes to this, because I'd promised 4 clients in England that when I got back that week, I was going to work with them and help them. I was committed." So I called each one, and I didn't know what to say, but I just told them this story exactly like I'm telling it to you. I said, "Something's happened." They knew about my divorce, so quite sympathetic. "Something's happened. Done this audition." I said, I've got this weird feeling that I just need to do this. It's almost like God wants me to do it or something, but I can't resist the force of feeling. I said, "However, if you say you want me to do the work I've obligated myself to do, I promise I'll do that, and I'll say no to this. I'm only going to do it if you give me your full blessing." And I had 4 calls like that, and every single one of them said, if I was you, I'd do it. And that was my confirmation signal. There was no money. I wasn't getting paid to be in the play. In fact, I was going to lose a lot of money by not doing that work. But I just knew life was inviting me to do something, and I knew it's the right thing to do. It just had to be done. And it changed my trajectory, that decision.
It's so good, Ray. So I just got this, again, like we love rambling on the show because different connections get made that you can't force to get made. my experience is, wow, this just happened to me 3 times. I forget what this, maybe it'll come back to me. Part of it is just old age, part of it is a lot of drug use as a teenager, but I don't remember thoughts all the time. But the listening to the inner guidance,
Yep.
Sometimes sounds like, oh, I know exactly what it was. So listening to the inner guidance sometimes sounds like, did you check the stove?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I have a
Yeah.
smoker. I've gotten into smoking meat, and I have this
Right.
big party every Labor Day
Right.
weekend where we it's a big barbecue and people come over and I smoke a bunch of meat and do that. And I had this thought, like, I should check a fuse blew on the smoker.
Ah.
And I was like, okay, I can replace the fuse, and replace the fuse. And I thought, I should really order an extra heating rod and an extra thermostat, because if those things blow, I'll have a problem. And I didn't order it. And sure enough, the day I'm supposed to smoke the meat, it's a Saturday, and the heating rod is blown, and I'm on the phone with them. And I was like, God damn it, I didn't listen to the voice.
Mm.
I didn't listen
Yeah.
to the voice about it. And I was like, all right, fine. And I worked around it. I was smart enough to figure out how to work around it. So disaster was averted. And then I was changing the propane on the grill top, and I thought, I should buy an extra diaphragm, one of the things that connects the grill to the propane tank, because sometimes those things blow, and I didn't buy it.
Yeah.
And sure enough, day of the barbecue, I'm hooking up the grill and it doesn't work. And I call my friend I was like, so the second thing I didn't listen to. And then I'm talking to my friend who's on his way to the party. I was like, can you stop at the hardware store and get a diaphragm? And he says, sure. And I have this thought, like, I should send him a picture of my diaphragm
Yeah.
so that he gets the right one. And I didn't send him the picture, and
Wow.
sure as shit, he shows up and it's not the right thing.
Oh no.
He has to go back to the store. And so I had 3 signals from the universe, those thoughts that we have.
Yeah.
Are our inner guidance talking to us.
Yeah.
They sound like that.
Yeah.
But we don't think of those things.
Jack Pransky in his books about this, somebody should have told us. He says you've got your habit voice and your wisdom voice, and they sound quite different.
Yeah. And they sound like, and for me, the other voice says, don't bother, you're okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And I find that, and this is the great thing about mindfulness and meditation and Vipassana, and that is that the rest of the voices quiet down, and that voice can now be heard. And the more you honor that voice and listen to it, the louder it gets, the easier it gets to hear, the more profound things because really, there's nothing profound about get a new propane tank diaphragm. There's not, it's not like a word, but it's guiding you in a direction that it can see is the right thing. And if we ignore those things, I ignore those things regularly versus honoring them and moving towards them, and then allowing the next thing and the next thing to open up.
Yeah.
And I think the more that we can trust, part of that is trusting yourself.
Yeah.
We call that trust yourself. That's the sort of the vernacular for, can you trust yourself?
Yeah. Yeah.
And James Clear has this great quote.
I love him. I love him. Right? Yeah. I post his quotes a lot on LinkedIn.
And one of them is, if you're avoiding doing the work before you start, it's probably procrastination. Yeah. And it's probably avoiding risk and procrastination, and you're probably best through pressing through that. Yeah. If you're avoiding it while you're doing it, then it may not be the right path. And it's something to consider. And I thought that's a great way to distinguish what we were talking about this pre-show, about the 2 different kinds of resistance that we feel. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Like there's, and I get into a lot of this, Esther Hicks and Abraham. Yeah. They channel some stuff, don't they? Yeah. Big fans on the show here. Great. Big Abraham Hicks fans. Great. And, she's always talking about the path of least resistance. And I've always coached people to go down the path of most resistance. I've always coached people, like, you want to go down if you're resisting something, you know, you said you have these rules, yeah?
Yeah, my 6 rules for happiness would
Right.
be touching into what you're talking about.
Right.
Sure.
I got these 10 rules, and one of them is you either do things that you're a fuck yes for or a fuck no to,
Yeah,
and leave everything else in the middle alone. You know, if
yeah,
you're a fuck yes, it's obvious
yeah,
to go for it. But if you're a fuck no, at the very least, it's worth examining what that resistance is about,
yeah,
right? Like, what's the big fuck no about?
mm,
Why are you a fuck no about that? And I think those are worthwhile distinctions to play with, is, you
mm,
know, really beginning to examine, if I'm a fuck no to something,
mm,
that's a resistance before I've started,
mm,
right? What am I avoiding in that?
mm,
What is it that
mm,
I don't want to overcome in that?
mm.
And I think there's a lot of value in both those perspectives, you know, like both things
Yeah,
being
yeah,
true. So I love that about, you know, what you said about your inner guidance, you know, guiding you towards that, and the confirmation signal. So now, do
yeah. And
you,
like you say, sometimes it's really banal. Like a week
yeah,
ago, I was driving my car and I knew that didn't feel right. I just knew it. I knew it, like I felt it was running too hot somehow because the fan was coming on. So I stopped at the garage and said, "Can you just check and see if I've got enough coolant?" And they said, "It's a good thing you stopped because you've got way too little, and you shouldn't be driving this." so
yeah,
so I
yeah, I
just
think,
knew, I just knew I had to stop.
and the quieter you get, the more, and for me, the more you practice mindfulness, the more you
Yeah,
practice meditation, the more you practice slowing down,
yeah,
the more you can hear those things. Those
yeah,
things are always speaking to us, but they get drowned out by the,
yeah,
you know, I, I, the predominant paradigm of hustle culture, and
yeah,
the illusion of success being solely measured by your bank account.
yeah,
Um, and there's so much more that's available to be heard,
yeah,
that you're really being guided towards, you know.
yeah,
So when
yeah,
you're talking about confirmation signals, I'm interested.
yeah.
Are those um are those do you determine those, this is personal, do you determine those before or after or both? Or like when you got in the New York Marathon, you sent off the ballot, or
Yeah.
the application, and you said, okay, if I get in.
Yeah, it's a mixture would be my answer. It
Yeah.
really is a mixture because some I don't know what would be a confirmation signal. Others I can see beforehand. So, for example, when I started this journey, I've written about in the book in 2005. Naturally, people I met asked me why I'd been traveling for 3 or 4 years, and I told them about what had happened and some other stories about the play and other things. And some of those people said to me at the end of the conversation, "Ray, are you ever going to write a book about any of this? Because if you do, I'd really like to read it." And I just laughed and said, "No, I'm not doing that to write a book. No chance." I really wasn't, genuinely wasn't. But I noticed after about 30, 40 people had said that, I thought, oh my gosh,
Mm.
perhaps I'm getting a message from the universe that I
Yeah.
need to do that. Now, by 2011, 2010, which was 5 years into the journey, I thought, right, I need to start writing a book because I'd heard it a lot. I thought, but I don't know how to write a book. I've got no bloody idea. I don't know where to even start. And as I was thinking that, I saw on Facebook that some big shot literary agent from New York was coming to Chiang Mai, where I was staying, running a 5-day writer's course. I thought, this is unbelievable. I can't know. You couldn't make this up. So I
Right.
thought, but I thought what I didn't know was whether that was the right course for me to be on,
Mm-hmm.
because it looked like it was for people that had already written a book or one or something.
Mm-hmm.
And it was $1,200. And I was a budget traveler. I didn't have $1,200. I couldn't afford it. So I thought, I'll write to her and I'll ask her 2 questions. And if she says yes to both, I'll take that as a confirmation signal I'm meant to be on that. So the 2 questions I asked were, would it be okay for a complete beginner novice like me to be in the class, or would I just get in the way of everyone else? Could I take part? And the second thing is, I can only pay $500. Would you let me do it for $500? And she wrote back and said yes to both. And I knew that was the confirmation.
Wow.
There you go. And that's also that
Yeah.
you know, certainly there's a rich conversation to be had in taking those asking for what you want.
Yeah, yeah.
know
And so I was so way out there with my navigation system. I never did that when I was a businessman. I was just really experimenting wildly with these things, just seeing
yeah.
where it would lead.
And
Yeah.
good, Chris, you had
Well,
something?
well, just to add in, I'm really hearing the partnership between you and the inner wisdom, that there's
Yeah,
hey, you saw the Facebook thing, but there was a place for you to jump in and do something. I think sometimes
yeah,
I can find myself thinking in the world of manifestation, it's just going to land on my doorstep and I don't have to do
yeah,
anything about it.
Right.
There's no agency for that I need to partake in. It's just going to show up. And
yeah,
I think this is that balancing the mindfulness with the CEO part, that there you can be mindful in business towards a vague destination and trust your inner wisdom to bring things up. But then there's still some agency you have in partnering with,
yeah,
asking, I can pay $500. Is that okay? Like there's a place for you to play here.
yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Yeah, because I do think that thing about it landing on your doorstep, if it's not in the perfect package,
Right.
then there's no confirmation versus,
Yeah,
Right.
no, wait a minute,
Yeah.
this did show up, so let me
yes,
see what kind of things and it's a no because I don't have the money,
yeah,
so therefore it's not a confirmation signal
yeah,
versus, oh, this is interesting enough that what if I asked, what if I pressed in just a little bit
yeah,
Exactly.
into what I already know,
yeah,
what I already know I can't afford it. That's what
yeah,
I already know. What if I just examined that
Mhm.
yeah.
and
Now,
pressed it?
one thing I saw about confirmation signals is that there's a time lag sometimes. You don't always get an instant or
Right.
immediate. And I don't know if I've got time, but I've got a great story to
Great.
illustrate
No,
that
we
one.
got time. We got time.
And I remember it by 2011, I was gaining confidence and trust in that system of following in inner wisdom. And I was sitting in my friend's house in Australia at Christmas that year. These are the same people that I went over to help. I went back a few times to stay with them. She's much better now, actually, that lady. And at 2011, I was looking at my Facebook feed and I saw a picture of a group of people in Chiang Mai where I was staying quite a bit. And in that picture was a picture of a woman who I thought, wow, she's really attractive. I didn't know her, but I knew some of the people surrounding her in the picture. I thought, oh, I wonder who she is. So I was sort of scrolling down her feed on Facebook to see if I could get a clue, and I couldn't. It's one of the weird things about Facebook, isn't it? You can see.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just thought, I don't want to ask Felicity, who put the picture up, to introduce me to her or anything like that, because that's a bit, forcing it. And I didn't trust that system anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I sat and closed my eyes at the table where I was sitting, and I said, universe, when I get back to Chiang Mai, which is going to be like in 2 months after that, just I want you to make it really easy for me to bump into that woman. And I want it to be completely effortless, but I want to bump into her somehow. And then I opened my eyes and I knew that's my intention out there. And then I totally forgot about it after that. I never even remembered I said that. And about 3 months later, I was in a cafe having breakfast in Chiang Mai after a morning run because I was training a lot. But this particular day, when I left the track after my run, I got on my motorbike. I always went to the same place. But this particular day, I thought, do you know what? I fancy going somewhere else today. I went to this place that I don't normally go. I went there, sat down, was reading the paper, having my breakfast. About 10 minutes later, she walked in, sat at the next table.
Wow.
I could not believe it because I'd really forgotten, but the universe hadn't. And then the problem shifted because then it was like, how am I actually going to start a conversation with her? Because I know who she is and all about her life. She has no clue that I even exist. That would be a weird conversation.
Yeah.
And that story is in the book, so I won't spoil it for anyone who's going to read the book.
Nice. I hear that and I think to myself, Ray, that sounds absurd to ask the universe. And it's not in a bad way. I'm just saying, like, I'm noticing the thought where I'm like, me to sit there and be like, universe, make it really easy for me to, whatever the request is. I find myself, this is my ego. I see that. But I feel that feels silly. That feels silly to do that. And because it feels silly, I stop myself from asking or even being playful with that because it feels silly. And but then I hear you or Michael Singer in the surrender experiment, just different people who are willing to surrender. And I realize that my ego and the silliness factor gets in the way of me being able to surrender.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I mean, that's that,
right.
Ray, where you, that silliness thing stops me all the time, being the first one to share at an event, first one to go dance at a party, the first, what people are going to think, how am I going to look, and, that resistance, right, to looking silly, that's a form of resistance right there. But that's the resistance before you start. That's the resistance that's
good.
That is required for a plane to take off, has to take off into the wind. If there's no resistance, the plane can't take off. The plane can't take off with the wind behind it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or it has to exert an enormous more amount of energy, right? You can use the wind in its face. So you need that resistance to grow. Muscles don't grow until they fail. Physical universe, that resistance is critical for development. If you if you help a chick out of the egg by breaking the egg for the chick dies because it didn't develop the muscles it needed to break through the shell. Right.
Yeah, that's right.
I bring it up because I feel like I don't think I'm alone in this. I think those of us who are in a mindful CEO environment, a conscious state of awareness. I want to be mindful. I also want to grow my intention and my purpose in the world. That there is this, we're drawn to surrender. We're drawn to the idea that there is manifestation and rockets of desires that get launched. And then there's this other piece that keeps us out of that state of surrender. Like I just shared about me, like there is this, and I really like from this conversation, the more that you can turn down that dial on your head from the noise of, because one of those voices that's really noisy is the silly voice. That's silly. That's stupid. Don't do that. And the more I can turn that down,
because that's the voice of the self-judge, you see.
Yes.
And I think, if you're not, if you're aware of that, you can say, I'm going to spend less time in self-judge and more time in self-coach. That's the,
or even self-love
or self-love. Yeah.
I was reading a Facebook post this morning. It was Neil Gaiman, who was sharing about an event he was at with all these creators and artists, and he's standing in the back of the room during some music at it, and he's talking to an older gentleman, and they started a conversation because they share the same first name, and the older gentleman is talking about, I stand here, and Neil Gaiman was at this event thinking, what am I doing here with all these great artists and creators? And the older gentleman was also saying the same thing, like, I don't even know what I'm doing here. I don't know what people have me here for, because I just simply go where I'm told to go. And Neil Gaiman says to him, yeah, but except you were the first person on the moon. That's probably a big deal. So he's the punchline, he's talking to Neil Armstrong, who's standing there thinking that he's inadequate to be in a room full of famous creators, that we all have that experience. This Neil Armstrong, that's not like some fucking guy in a diner. That's Neil Armstrong. And yet he's got the same sort of, what am I doing here? How am I, all I did was they told me to go and I went.
Yeah.
That's his relationship.
I was just doing my job. Yeah, that's
it. So it doesn't matter who you are or what you've accomplished. It's really not a function of your past or your accomplishments from your own view. You're always going to discount that. That's not the issue. But can you quiet those voices? Can you distinguish those voices from, the ones that are actually empowering you to get the next step and what you're really up to? And keep taking those actions. I think that's, radically important for us to be able to do, and why I find, and that thing about feeling silly, God, that stops so many people from even just meditating.
Yeah.
Because it feels so silly just to sit and be quiet. To think that sitting in meditation for
absurd.
10 minutes
It's absurd.
it's absurd. I mean, it's just and in the beginning it feels shitty. It hurt, like working out,
Yeah. But Aaron, when I was in 2006 in the monastery, I remember thinking, because I was only like a year since I was running my business. I remember thinking, God, one day all CEOs and executives are going to be doing this.
Yeah.
And now they are, now it's part of everything. It was only 20 years it took, or 15 or 20 years for it to become mainstream.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. That's the other.
You say that all the time, Aaron.
Yeah, I do. That's the other bell that I'm ringing these days.
Yeah.
Is, in the 1960s, if you saw someone running, you would say, you'd ask, who's chasing you?
Yeah, that's from there's a Dan Harris video where he says that, isn't he?
Is that right?
I don't know.
Mindfulness is your superpower. Yeah, he's got a little animated video on YouTube. Yeah, it's very good.
I love Dan Harris. It's a great book. 10% Happier. It's a great book. But there's no context for it. There's no
that's right.
For it. And meditation is the same way. And in the beginning, running hurts.
Yeah,
it's fucking hard.
Yeah.
Do
you run?
I don't, but I do do CrossFit, and
okay.
It's the same thing with resistance training. In the 80s, if you did resistance training, they would think you were trying to look like Arnold, because that's the only context was pumping iron. Weight training didn't become a thing until 10 years after pumping iron came out, because in the beginning, all it looked like was, if you're pumping iron, you're going to look like Arnold. It's the only reason to do it, was to become Mr. Universe.
Yeah.
But there was, but like any kind of resistance training, it hurts in the beginning. You're developing new muscles, and meditation is exactly the same way. You're developing new muscles. You're developing a new capacity, cardiovascular capacity by running, muscle capacity by lifting weights, mental capacity by meditation. It's exactly the same thing. I mean, it's scientifically proven to be exactly the same thing. You literally are changing the gray matter in your brain by meditating. And the context is now catching up. The container is now getting bigger, that CEOs see, oh, wait a minute, my actively not doing anything, my actively sitting quietly for 10, 15 minutes a day doesn't look like I'm doing anything, but no one's got a problem saying I work out in the gym for an hour. No one's like, oh my God, what are you wasting time for? No one ever says that anymore. There's no one who would say, oh, your gym time is not productive time. And your meditation time is the exact same productive phenomena, because you're taking the time to grow the prefrontal cortex and thin the amygdala. You're literally doing that work. So I think that's a super valuable thing. And I love that that's the example. And I love that Dan Harris has that I haven't seen, but it's such a confirmation signal. There we go. Because he's one of my heroes. I sent him a mug. I haven't heard back from him, which is
okay.
I have a little mug that says "Namaste, motherfucker," and on the back it says, "The motherfucker in me recognizes the motherfucker in you." And I sent him one of those, and I'm still waiting for him to send me a card. Thank you.
Maybe bring us home. Can we have Ray bring us home with like some final thoughts on life without a tie, or confirmation signals, living mindfully,
and then how we get a hold of you, how people,
and then how we get a hold of you.
Yeah. I mean, it's been, for me, what I'm really passionate about, what am I interested in, and why do I do all this? Because my own challenge in my life has been to find what I would call my own true path, to live as an original being, not just making default choices that copy other people's choices, because I haven't got the originality or the presence to really feel into what would really excite me to do, and what feels right, and what feels like it's what I was born to do, and all of those things, where everything intersects. And so I feel like I've learned a lot about that in the journey, and so I now dedicate myself to helping others, because my sixth rule of six is you got you got to have the 5 rules that I haven't got time to cover, but the sixth rule is you got to do all of those things for yourself, and you've got to empower others to have the same view of life. Because if you're not helping other people, you can't be deeply fulfilled. I don't think that's not how it seems to me.
Yeah, I'm with
So
you.
so that's for me, why I'm committed to working with people to ensure they find their own true path. Because not only would that be great for them as an individual, we need people in the world who live that way. Because the standard of leadership, in my opinion, public is very poor. There's a lot of self-interested, corrupt individuals, psychopathic individuals leading organizations, which have a huge impact on the quality of life for us. And it needs to change. And I can't change all of that. I can change one thing at a time, perhaps. That's why I do what I do. So my encouragement to anyone who's thinking this way is to really spend the time and really start to reflect deeply on what really is your true path, and get some support and some help to do that if you need it.
And if they want it from you, how do they reach you?
I reckon anyone who's got an interest in what we've talked about today should read Life Without a Tie. This is the book. Life Without a Tie. It's on Amazon. And I've got a website called lifewithoutatie.com, which has got pictures from the journey and, stuff that reflects that. So that's a good start place. Yeah, definitely.
Fabulous.
Yeah. Definitely.
Ray,
What a pleasure to meet you too. What a pleasure to meet both of you.
Conversation, really fabulous. Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Okay.
Awesome. Thanks everybody for hanging out with us this time. We'll catch you in the next episode.
Wait. If you like the show, make sure you write us a review and share this with the people you love, and share this on the social medias and let people know about the show, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah. Awesome. Hey friends, if you liked that episode, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. To get our 6-Figure Agent Blueprint and other free resources, you can visit 6figureagent.net. That's a number 6figureagent.net today.